Why was everyone staring at her? Maybe it was the way she sat alone, quiet, like someone who didn't belong yet didn't care to. Maybe it was the faint scar near her jaw, or the way her eyes kept scanning the exits, counting heads without meaning to. The kind of instinct that comes from places most people never see, places that never leave you. The sound of beer spilling broke the hum of conversation. Golden liquid splashed across her gray scrubs, seeping into the fabric. "Oops, my bad, sweetheart," said a man with a grin too sharp to be friendly. Garrett Donovan, Navy SEAL built like a tank, full of whiskey and bravado. Brin Callahan didn't look up. She just set her phone down and reached for a napkin. Calm, controlled, wiping the stain with small, deliberate motions. "This ain't a place for tourists, baby," Garrett said. "Anchor points for real warriors. You should head home." His friends laughed, loud, cruel. The sound carried across the bar like a challenge. She kept blotting, silent. "Hey, I'm talking to you." His hand caught her wrist. No one really saw what happened next. Only the aftermath. Garrett's face pressed against the bar, arm locked behind his back, his breath coming in startled bursts. It took less than a second. The music died, conversations froze. From a corner booth, a man with steel-gray hair lowered his whiskey. Master Chief Colton Thatcher, 25 years in Spec Ops. He'd seen fast before, but not like that. Not that smooth, not that clean. "Let him go," said another man, Captain Sloan, the kind who carried authority like a badge and wore it too loud. Brin released Garrett and sat back, motion fluid, expression blank, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just dropped a Navy SEAL without standing up. Garrett pushed off the bar, red with anger and embarrassment. Lucky shot. She looked at him, voice steady. "A water, please." The bartender, Wyatt Mercer, ex-Army Ranger, ink crawling up his forearms, hesitated before nodding. He'd seen plenty of bar fights, but not this kind of precision, not that kind of control. She accepted the glass, sipped once, then set it down exactly where the condensation ring formed. Around her the air had changed, the way everyone looked at her different now, curious, cautious. Wyatt couldn't stop watching the way she moved. The subtle shift of her shoulders, her eyes constantly calculating. That wasn't from some weekend self-defense class. That was the kind of awareness drilled into muscle and bone through years of survival. Still, someone had to say it. "Guess the little nurse watched YouTube combat tutorials," Knox Ridley scoffed, smirking. "Nice reflexes, sweetheart." The word nurse rippled through the crowd like static. Someone whispered she worked at Coronado Medical Center. Emergency room, 12-hour shifts. Garrett sneered. "If you're such a badass, how about arm wrestling?" Brin didn't move. "No, thank you." Scared, Sloan pushed. Her tone stayed even. "Tell me something. Third phase of Bud S, week 5, underwater knot tying procedure when your dive buddy experiences shallow water blackout. What's the protocol?" The laughter faltered. That wasn't the kind of question a civilian asked. Sloan blinked. "Excuse me." She leaned forward slightly. "Because the one you're taught in training, recovery to surface with lateral support, increases the risk of secondary drowning by 30%. Any combat diving medic knows that." The silence that followed was sharp. Wyatt set down the glass he'd been polishing. "Prove it." He reached beneath the counter and slid something toward her, an unloaded Glock 19. "Field strip it," his eyes said. She looked at it for a moment. 17 seconds with tools, she murmured, 23 without, range records 32. And then she moved. Left hand only, water glass still in her right. Slide, barrel, spring, every piece placed in perfect order, precise, methodical. No flourish, no drama, just clean execution. 15.4 seconds. One hand. Wyatt's jaw went slack. The bar was dead silent. Thatcher watched her fingers tremble just slightly when it was over, That tiny tell adrenaline restraint. She wasn't showing off. She was suppressing instinct. Garrett's eyes darted around, searching for something to say, some way to reclaim control. "Who taught you that?" he demanded. Brin didn't answer. But inside her chest felt tight. The smell of gun oil, the scrape of sand. For a heartbeat, she wasn't in the bar anymore. She was somewhere else. Syria. A radio crackling against the heat. Shadow 7, evac now. Voices strained, gunfire in the distance. 48 civilians waiting in the compound. And the air thick with dust, fear, and copper. Her vision flickered, the sound of mortars, a scream she couldn't unhear. Roe and Alice, 2 operators, both gone. 10 minutes. 5 dead. Intel had said minimal resistance. Intel had been wrong. She tasted blood, grit, smoke. Vindicor One abort mission, the radio hissed. Negative. I don't leave without them, all of them. Her finger tightened on the M110 trigger. 70 fighters in her scope, then 80, they kept coming. 16 hours alone. Her pulse spiked, and the bar came rushing back. The Glock lay, disassembled before her. She exhaled slowly, controlled, focused. From the corner, Colonel Graham Sutton entered, eyes locked on her like he'd just seen a ghost. "That's not standard CQC," he said quietly. "That's something else." Thatcher was already on his phone, face pale. The way his hands shook didn't match the calm of his voice. Garrett smirked again, but it was weaker now. "Everyone got a call sign. What's yours?" Brin sipped her water. The ice clinked softly. "I don't have one." "Everyone does," Sloan said, voice sharp. "Unless you're lying." Garrett leaned forward. "Last chance, you a fraud, sweetheart." "Stand down, Lieutenant," Thatcher snapped suddenly. The door swung open. Admiral Pierce Whitmore stepped in civilian clothes, eyes hard, scanning the room until they found her. "Admiral," Sutton started, but Whitmore raised a hand. He took 3 measured steps forward. Garrett's laughter faltered. "Say it," he demanded. Brin stood, 5'6", small frame, quiet presence, but in that moment she seemed larger than any of them. She looked straight at Garrett, no anger, just calm. "Vindicor One." The bottle slipped from his hand, shattered across the floor. Garrett froze. Sloan covered her mouth. Wyatt's glass slipped from his fingers. Sutton went pale. Thatcher's phone fell to the table. The bar was silent. Whitmore stopped in front of her. His voice broke when he spoke. "Master Chief Vindicor One," he said softly, "I'm sorry." Phones rose around them, cameras recording, but nobody dared move. The name moved through the room like a storm. Vindicor One. The ghost sniper. The operator who never missed. The one who wasn't supposed to exist. Sutton whispered it under his breath. 127 confirmed kills. Sloan's eyes were wet. Only female to complete Delta selection. Thatcher's voice was rough. Operation Blackwater, Eastern Syria, 2019. Whitmore nodded slowly. Master Chief Brin Callahan, most decorated female operator in U.S. history. 4 years ago, she didn't officially exist. Brin didn't flinch, didn't smile, just stood there still as stone, letting the weight of old ghosts settle on her shoulders again. Garrett swallowed hard, the cocky gleam gone. Whitmore's tone softened, almost reverent. Operation Blackwater, 6 operators sent to extract 48 civilians. Intel said light resistance. 200 fighters surrounded them. 5 operators killed in 15 minutes. He hesitated, looking at her. She held the compound for 16 hours alone, saved every civilian, after watching her entire team die. No one spoke. Brin's voice came out quiet, cracked. "Tariq, 8 years old, his sister Illa, 6, last group we evacuated." Her eyes drifted somewhere distant. "Layla, their mother, was shot. Tariq wouldn't leave her. He said, 'I'll be brave, miss. I'll be brave like you.'" She paused. The bar stayed utterly still. 8 years old, she whispered, comforting me while bullets hit the walls. Her voice broke just once. Sutton blinked through tears, but the report listed you as KIA. Brin nodded. Because I was supposed to be. 67 wounds, died twice on medevac, 8 months at Walter Reed under a false name, my team dead, my identity sealed. She drew in a shaky breath. Master Chief Callahan died in that valley. I became Brin, a nurse, saving lives instead of taking them. She looked around, living quietly instead of seeking glory. Whitmore's voice was heavy. Vindicor One is dead. Brin nodded once, exactly how it should be. And she walked out. The soft click of the door closing was louder than any gunfire. Outside, the evening light hit her face. She could still smell the sand, still feel the heat. Somewhere behind her, people were whispering her name. Vindicor One, the ghost sniper, the myth. She didn't turn around. Because Brin Callahan wasn't a myth. She was just tired. And sometimes the strongest thing a soldier can do is stop fighting. Why did silence feel heavier than gunfire? 3 hours had passed since she walked out of Anchor Point. Her scrubs were still damp from spilled beer, her pulse finally steadying as the city blurred by outside the car window. Streetlights painted silver streaks across her reflection, eyes that looked calm but weren't. Brin Callahan parked near her apartment. The key turned twice before she stepped inside. Boxes still sat stacked by the wall, half her life packed in cardboard. She was supposed to move in a week. New department, new title. Head of Trauma Services, Coronado Medical. It sounded clean on paper, orderly, but she knew titles couldn't fix what sleep couldn't erase. The apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the fridge. A photograph rested on the coffee table, edges frayed. A group of civilians smiling in front of a small school rebuilt in Syria. 48 faces. Children, parents, medics. Alive. She ran her thumb over 2 in the center. Tariq and Illa, the siblings she'd carried through fire. Both older now, their smiles free of the weight she still carried. Her chest tightened. They lived, her team didn't. Brin set the photo down and stared at the coin on the table beside it, Delta Force insignia, scuffed and faded. Colton Thatcher's coin. He slipped it into her pocket during medevac. She still didn't know why. The knock on the door startled her, sharp, measured. She froze, fingers brushing the pistol in the drawer before stopping herself. Old habits. Opening the door, she found Wyatt Mercer, the bartender, standing there in a gray hoodie, eyes uncertain. "Didn't mean to intrude," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Thatcher said you might want this." He held out her phone. She hadn't realized she'd left it behind. "Thanks," she said softly, taking it. He hesitated, glancing at the photo behind her. That was one hell of a night. "Yeah," she murmured. "I think you scared half the bar." "They'll live." He smiled faintly. "You always that calm under fire." She looked at him. "You ever seen someone bleed out because of a bad call?" His expression shifted. He didn't answer. "Then no," she said quietly. "I'm not calm, I'm careful." Wyatt nodded slowly. "Fair enough." He lingered, then added, "For what it's worth, we all owe you a drink." "Please don't," she said. "Just forget it happened." He started to reply, but the tone in her voice stopped him. There was finality in it, the kind soldiers used when they'd buried enough ghosts. "Take care, Callahan," he said softly and left. The door clicked shut. Brin exhaled, long and low. Forget it happened. If only it were that easy. Sleep didn't come. It rarely did. When it did, it brought her back there. Syria. The smell of smoke and copper, the sand grinding between her teeth. Her rifle steady against the wall, her heart beat louder than the mortars. Shadow 7 copy were pinned. Negative contact. She remembered the sound of Rose's voice just before the line went dead. She remembered Alice laughing about bad instant coffee that morning, now lying still beside the medical crate. 6 operators had gone in. 1 came out. Sorry. She could still feel the heat of the scope against her cheek, the way her vision tunneled after 16 hours of holding position. 48 civilians in the basement of the compound, children crying, her shoulder bleeding, ammo almost gone. She hadn't eaten, hadn't moved, only fired when it mattered. 1 shot at a time. Every pull of the trigger came with a name, a reason. And yet the faces still followed her. When she closed her eyes, she didn't see the enemy. She saw Tariq, 8 years old, whispering that he'd be brave. She saw Layla's hand slipping away as the sun rose. "Don't let them die," Layla had said. Brin never did. She saved them all. But the cost she never stopped counting. The next morning, her reflection in the mirror looked the same as always, tired, composed, almost unrecognizable to the woman she once was. At the hospital, fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The ER buzzed with controlled chaos, gurneys rolling, monitors beeping, voices clipped and urgent. Nurse Callahan, 2 incoming traumas, a resident called out. Vitals. Gunshot, 1 critical, 1 stable. Gunshots. Her throat tightened. Funny how the word could freeze you even now. She forced her voice steady. Prep trauma bay 1, notify surgical. Her steps were automatic, efficient. The same kind of rhythm she'd used clearing rooms in a firefight, controlled breathing, quick scans, no hesitation. The doors burst open. Medics rushed in with a man covered in blood, bullet wound through the chest. Civilian, wrong place, wrong night. Brin's glove snapped on. 1 amp epi pressure here. The man gasped. She pressed her hands down firm. Stay with me. The rhythm of CPR blurred with the pounding in her ears. The man's pulse flickered, then faded. Time of death, someone said. Brin stepped back. The smell of iron filled her lungs again. She stared at her hands, steady, but trembling inside. And just like that, she was back there. Her hands covered in someone else's blood. A different man, a teammate. Same helplessness. Same silence afterward. Brin, a voice pulled her back. It was Dr. Alyssa Kane, head of ER. Concern written all over her face. You okay? Fine, Brin said automatically. Alyssa didn't believe her. You froze for a second. Just thinking. About. Brin hesitated, then forced a thin smile. Nothing that matters anymore. But it did, it always did. That night she sat on her balcony with a mug of black coffee, watching the ocean. The sound of waves usually calmed her. Not tonight. The phone buzzed, unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Then Master Chief Callahan. Her grip tightened. Don't call me that. Too late, the voice said. Deep, rough Thatcher. She exhaled. You shouldn't be calling either. Admiral Whitmore's not thrilled about what happened at Anchor Point, but word's out now. You can't put the ghost back in the grave. Then bury it deeper. Not an option. Brin's voice dropped. What do you want? There was a pause, the kind that meant something bad was coming. Someone asking questions about Blackwater, old files, intel leaks. A journalist's been digging ex-operator on the record. Brin's jaw tightened. They can't, that operation's sealed. Was sealed, Thatcher corrected. Now it's bleeding out. She stared into the dark horizon. What's that got to do with me? You were there. You're the only one still alive who can confirm or deny. I'm done confirming anything. Brin, his tone softened. You saved 48 people. You earned your peace. But if this story goes wrong, it won't be peace that follows. It'll be vultures. And you know what they do to the truth. She didn't answer. You can't hide forever, Thatcher added quietly. And you shouldn't have to. The line went dead. Brin set the phone down and stared at the waves again. She thought of the school, the children, the photo. If the story leaked, they'd come looking for her. For Vindicor One. The myth. Not Brin. And that was what scared her most. Later that night, lightning flickered over the ocean. She stood in the rain, barefoot, hair unbound, the wind tugging at her like an old memory. For a moment she imagined she could hear it again, the radio static, the call sign echoing through the storm. Vindicor One, copy, hold position. Her breath caught. No, she whispered to the night, she's gone. But deep down, Brin knew the truth. You can't kill a name, not one the world builds from your silence. And some ghosts never stay buried. The next morning, when she entered the hospital, a military sedan was parked across the street, windows tinted, engine idling. She felt the old pulse return, the awareness, the suspicion, the instinct. She didn't look directly at it, just kept walking. But she knew. Someone was watching. And whatever was coming had already begun. How long can you run from a name that isn't supposed to exist? 3 days after Anchor Point, her life felt like someone had hit record and pause at the same time. The ER shifts kept her moving, but her mind was drifting, never fully in the room, never fully gone. She'd check vitals, write charts, give orders, but each voice, each monitor beep carried a distant echo of something older. Radio chatter, rifle bolts, distant thunder over sand. She hadn't told anyone about the car parked across from her apartment. It came back every night. Same tinted windows. Same quiet hum of the engine. By the third night, she left her lights off and sat by the window in the dark, watching the reflection of her own face in the glass. Not the face of Vindicor One. Not the woman who once held a compound alone against 200 fighters. Just Brin, 32, tired, human. But maybe that was the problem. The world didn't believe ghosts could bleed. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She ignored it. It buzzed again, then again. Finally, she picked up. Callahan. Ma'am, this is Captain Sloan. She froze. You have some nerve calling me. I know, but we've got a situation. I'm not military anymore. Doesn't matter. You're involved whether you like it or not. Her tone dropped low and dangerous. Why? Sloan exhaled through the phone. Because someone just leaked your name. The room seemed to tilt. What did you say? An independent journalist out of D.C. released an article this morning. Claims to have inside sources confirming Vindicor One was female. Named you, Brin Callahan, former Delta Force operator. They're calling it the ghost that never died. Her pulse slammed in her chest. Tell me you're lying. I wish I was. News outlets picked it up. Social media's exploding, and that's not the worst part. Brin's jaw tightened. Then what is? They're questioning the operation itself. The number of civilian deaths, the mission authorization, even the intel that sent you there. Commands scrambling for damage control. She closed her eyes. They're rewriting the truth. They always do, Sloan said quietly. But this time, they're using your name to do it. The line went silent for a long beat. Ma'am, Sloan finally said, Admiral Whitmore's calling an informal briefing. He wants you there, tonight. No, Brin said, I'm out. You think I wanted to be back in this either? Sloan's voice cracked slightly. But this isn't about rank anymore. It's about narrative. They'll use you, Brin. You know they will, unless you speak. She hung up. And for the first time in 4 years, she didn't know what silence was worth anymore. The briefing room was smaller than she remembered. Same gray walls, same metallic table, same flickering overhead light that made everyone's eyes look hollow. Admiral Whitmore stood at the head of the room. Sutton, Thatcher, and Sloan flanked the table. She walked in wearing her civilian clothes, jeans, black shirt, no insignia, no identity. The air was thick with unspoken things. Whitmore looked older, his voice slower. "Thank you for coming, Brin." "I didn't," she said quietly. "You called, I answered." He nodded, accepting it. "You've seen the article." "I read enough to know they got it half right." Sutton leaned forward. "They're saying Operation Blackwater was unauthorized, that we went rogue." Brin's eyes flicked to him. "Didn't we?" The room froze. Whitmore sighed. "You know how it was, politics, intelligence failures. We did what we had to do." Brin's voice was soft but sharp. You weren't there, Admiral." No one spoke. Thatcher cleared his throat. "We're not here to argue history. We're here to protect what's left of it. If they turn this into a scandal, everything we did, everything you did, will be twisted." She stared at the table. "So you want me to lie?" "Not lie," Whitmore said carefully. "Clarify." Brin laughed once, low, bitter. "Clarify." Thatcher met her eyes. "You don't owe them silence anymore, Callahan, but you don't owe them chaos either." She looked at each of them. "And if I refuse to play?" Sutton folded his arms. "Then the government will. They'll bury you again, but this time alive." Her hand curled into a fist under the table. For a long moment no one spoke. Then she stood. "4 years ago," she said, "I watched my team die because of an intel report that said light resistance. I held a position alone for 16 hours because command didn't send extraction when they promised. And when it was over, they erased me, called me dead, because the truth was inconvenient." Her eyes lifted. "Now you want me to help them rewrite it again." "Brin," Whitmore said softly, "it's not that simple." "It never is," she replied. She turned and walked out. The night air hit like cold water. She didn't stop walking until she reached the pier, the same one she used to run to after long shifts. Waves broke against the rocks below, hissing like the whisper of old voices. Somewhere behind those voices, she heard Roe again. "Keep your head down, V. Don't play hero." But heroes were the first to die. And survivors, they just had to learn how to live with it. Her phone vibrated again. A text, unknown number. "You don't know me, but I know who you are. You left people behind in Blackwater. We have proof." Brin's fingers went cold. Another text followed. "Meet me tomorrow, 2100, Pier 17. Come alone, or the world will hear the rest." She stood there for a long time, the ocean swallowing the words in her mind. Proof? She thought she'd saved them all. 48 civilians, no losses among evacuees. That was the report. Wasn't it? But the face of one woman, Layla, flickered in her memory, the mother who didn't make it. Layla's last breath, her blood on Brin's hands. Had someone seen that, filmed it? Her chest tightened. "No," she whispered, "they're lying." But doubt is a weapon, sharper than any bullet. And once it's fired, it doesn't miss. The next day passed in a haze. Brin went through the motions at the hospital. Triage, sutures, consultations, every task mechanical. But her mind kept returning to Pier 17. To that message. She debated not going. But she knew herself too well. Curiosity kills more soldiers than bullets. By 2100 hours the pier was empty, the sky overcast, ocean restless. She stood near the edge, her jacket pulled tight. The air smelled of salt and diesel. "Brin Callahan," a voice called from the shadows. A man stepped forward, civilian clothes, camera bag slung across his chest. "Who are you?" she asked. "Name, Ryan Pierce, investigative journalist." "You texted me." He nodded. "I've been digging into Operation Blackwater. The story's bigger than they let on." She studied him carefully. "You said I left people behind." He hesitated. "You did, or someone did. There's footage, unreleased drone feed. It shows a secondary structure burning after extraction. There were people inside. Her heartbeat spiked. That's impossible. We swept every building. Not that one. He handed her a flash drive. Watch it yourself. She didn't take it. Why come to me? Because they'll destroy it if I go public without confirmation. And because you were there. You're the only one who can tell me what really happened. Brin looked past him at the ocean, the horizon blurred by fog. You have no idea what you're playing with, she said. Maybe not, Ryan replied. But truth doesn't stay buried. You of all people should know that. He started to leave but paused. You weren't the villain, Callahan, but someone was, and it's time people knew who. His footsteps faded down the pier. She stared after him, the flash drive still glinting in her hand like a live grenade. Back home, she sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, hands trembling. She hesitated for a long time before inserting the drive. The video loaded, grainy drone footage, timestamped October 14, 2019. Her throat tightened as the image sharpened the compound, the same one she'd held for 16 hours. The feed tracked movement, muzzle flashes, explosions, her own figure sprinting between cover. Then a secondary building smaller to the east, fire spreading, no movement inside. The camera zoomed in. A window. 2 silhouettes. Children. Her pulse stopped. God, she whispered. The footage cut to static. She slammed the laptop shut, breath ragged. No, she whispered again. I checked every room. But doubt had already burrowed deep. What if she had? What if in the chaos, in the exhaustion, in the noise, she'd missed something? Her chest heaved. The ghosts she'd buried were clawing back through the dirt. Outside, thunder rolled in from the coast. And somewhere beneath it, or maybe only in her mind, she heard the old radio call again. Vindicor One, confirm evac complete. Her voice trembling across time. Confirmed, she'd said, all civilians accounted for. Now sitting alone in the dark, that line felt like a lie. Maybe the worst kind of heroism isn't what you did, but what you thought you did. And maybe the truth doesn't destroy you. Maybe it just waits. How do you carry the weight of lives you didn't know you lost? Brin Callahan hadn't slept in 40 hours. The glow of her laptop still haunted the walls, that frozen image of a burning building, 2 small silhouettes behind the flames. She tried convincing herself it was a trick of light, an artifact of bad resolution. But no matter how she tried, the image stayed. The ghosts had faces again. Her coffee had gone cold. The rain outside hadn't stopped since dawn. She replayed the footage for the 7th time, pausing at the same second, the same window, the same impossible truth. 2 children, she whispered to herself. Impossible. The words tasted like sand. In Syria, she'd swept every corridor, every room. Twice. She remembered the smell of cordite, the broken tiles under her boots, the echo of children crying. She remembered Tariq clinging to her arm, refusing to run without his mother. She remembered the blood, the screaming, the exhaustion that made minutes blur into hours. But she didn't remember that building. And that was the worst part, not the image itself, but the hole it carved in her certainty. By noon, she was back at the hospital. Her body was there, but her mind was. A patient screamed in pain. A nurse asked for morphine orders twice before Brin responded. She was running on reflex, the same way she'd run missions. Keep moving, keep acting. Don't think too much or the weight crushes you. After the shift, she washed her hands until the water turned pink from raw skin. She watched her reflection in the stainless steel, hollow eyes, dark circles, the faint twitch of her jaw. She was unraveling, quietly. That's when her phone buzzed again, a number she didn't recognize. Ryan Pierce, you saw it, didn't you? She typed back without thinking. It's not real. It's real, the metadata's clean, no manipulation. Then someone staged it. Then who? She stared at the message. She didn't have an answer. Her instinct screamed to delete everything, to cut contact, disappear again. But her conscience, the one thing the war hadn't managed to kill, whispered something else. If it's true, you owe them. That evening, she drove out to see someone she hadn't seen in years, Colonel Graham Sutton. He was retired now, living outside San Diego. The kind of man who spent his days tending to tomato plants but still checked perimeter lights twice a night. When she knocked, he opened the door and froze. Callahan. Colonel. For a moment neither spoke, then he stepped aside. Come in. His house smelled of wood and whiskey. Photos lined the mantel, military plaques, squad shots, folded flags. Too many folded flags. You've seen the leak, he asked. Worse, she said, I've seen footage. He nodded once slow. Drone. Yes. And... Her throat tightened. It shows civilians trapped inside a burning building. On site, same day, I didn't see it on the ground. Sutton exhaled through his nose. There was no secondary structure in the initial map. There was, she said quietly. We just didn't get that far. His gaze sharpened. You're saying the intel failed again. I'm saying maybe I did. Sutton shook his head. No, I read every debrief, Brin. You covered every section of that compound. You pulled out 48 civilians under heavy fire. No one could have done more. Then why are there two shadows in that window? She asked. He looked away. Maybe heat distortion, maybe bad data. Or maybe I was the hero they made me out to be. The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled too tight. Finally, Sutton poured her a glass of bourbon. The truth, Callahan, there are no heroes, just survivors, and survivors remember different versions of hell. She didn't drink, just stared at the amber liquid catching the lamplight. I can't live with this, she said finally, if I failed. You didn't fail. I might have. He leaned forward. And what happens if you prove that? You destroy yourself, your career, and every life that mission saved. You'll feed the story that's already tearing through the press. Maybe that story deserves to live. No, Sutton said sharply. That story will eat you alive. She stood. Maybe I deserve it. He didn't stop her when she left. Driving home, rain lashed the windshield, blurring the world into streaks of gray and red. Her mind replayed every second from that day in 2019, every order, every scream, every trigger pull. There was something else, something she'd forgotten. A moment near the end. The air support call. The smoke pillar east of the compound. She'd heard it, but she'd been bleeding out, delirious, trying to keep Tariq and Illa alive. Had she called in a strike too close? The possibility hit like a punch. Her grip tightened on the steering wheel until her knuckles went white. No, she whispered. No, I did. But part of her wasn't sure anymore. That night she couldn't stop shaking. Her hands, steady in every surgery and firefight, trembled over a cup of tea she never drank. Her phone rang again. This time it was Ryan. It was Wyatt. Hey, he said, you okay? You've been off shift 2 days, thought I'd check. She hesitated. Yeah, just tired. You don't sound tired. You sound like someone who saw a ghost. She almost laughed. Maybe I did. Wyatt paused. Whatever's happening, you don't have to carry it alone. She wanted to believe him. She really did. But the truth was, she'd never known any other way to carry it. Later, she found herself sitting on the floor beside her couch, surrounded by old gear she hadn't touched in years. Her field notebook, her patch, and at the bottom her body cam. Still functional, still encrypted. She powered it on. The small screen flickered to life, showing the timestamp, October 14, 2019. Her heart raced. The last thing she remembered was calling the final evac chopper. But maybe she'd recorded more. She hit play. The footage was rough, jittery, flashes of light, gunfire, voices shouting through the comms. Her own breathing filled the mic, ragged and quick. Shadow 7, this is Vindicor One. Building clear, civilians secured, need immediate extraction. Static, then a voice Whitmore's, faint through interference. Copy Vindicor, hold position. Air support inbound, mark your LZ. She turned the camera, showing the courtyard, the smoldering wreckage. Then another sound. An explosion in the distance. Her head jerked toward it. She whispered that wasn't ours. The video glitched, the feed distorting for a moment before stabilizing again. Smoke rose from the east, from the same direction as the building in the drone footage. Her voice came again, shaky. Whitmore East Sector just took fire. That's outside grid. Confirm strike coordinates. Static. Then silence. The video ended. Brin sat frozen, the camera slipping from her hand. God, she breathed, they hit it. Not her. Command. The realization settled like lead in her gut. She hadn't failed. They had. They authorized a misfire on a civilian structure and buried it under classified reports. And now the world was blaming her. Her phone buzzed again. Ryan Pierce. We need to talk. They know I have the footage. Her pulse surged. Where are you? She texted. No reply. Another message came instead, a photo. Ryan's car, windows shattered, blood on the seat. Then nothing. Brin's breath caught. The rain outside had stopped, but her heart didn't. The shadows were moving again, the kind she thought she'd left behind. If Ryan was dead, that meant someone wanted the truth buried for good. And if they came for him, they'd come for her next. For a long time she just stood there, staring at the photo. The moral lines that used to define her world, duty, honor, service, had blurred into shades of gray. She was Vindicor One anymore. But the world was reminding her that sometimes you don't get to choose who you are. Sometimes the past doesn't knock. It kicks the door down. Outside, the first siren echoed in the distance. And Brin Callahan, nurse, soldier, ghost, began to realize that the war she thought ended in Syria was coming home. When did the truth start to feel like an ambush? The photo on Brin's phone wouldn't stop flashing in her head. Ryan's car, shattered glass, streaks of blood on the seat. The timestamp read 23 minutes after his last text. That was all it took, 23 minutes for a man to vanish because he wanted the truth. She'd seen plenty of people die, but this felt different. It wasn't war. It was clean, planned, surgical. Someone was cleaning up the past. And she was next on the list. Her apartment felt smaller that night, too quiet, too staged. She moved through it slowly, her instincts humming the way they used to on ops, subtle, automatic, never forgotten. One step near the window, stop, listen. A second pause by the door, hand to frame, pressure check. The lock was scratched. She crouched, tracing the edge, fresh marks. Someone had picked it maybe hours ago. Her heart rate spiked, but her breathing stayed even. They'd been here. She went straight to the coffee table, the body cam, gone. Her stomach dropped. Everything she'd recorded, every piece of proof that the strike came from command, gone. God damn it, she whispered. Her pulse quickened. She scanned the rest of the room, drawers pulled slightly open, closet latch off-center. Whoever broke in hadn't been looking for money. They wanted the evidence. Her phone buzzed and she flinched. Unknown number again. If you want to live, stop asking questions. No signature, no trace. She stared at it for a long moment before setting the phone down. They made one mistake. They assumed she was afraid. By morning, she'd already packed. A small duffel, clothes, ID, her old Sig Sauer P226 and the coin Thatcher had given her. She'd spent years running from things. Now she was running towards something. The hospital would call. She didn't answer. Her name was probably already on a watch list by now. The leaked article had made her a target from both sides. The government wanted her silent. The press wanted her story. And Brin Callahan just wanted the truth. She drove north toward Oceanside, quiet, gray morning light over the Pacific. The sky looked like metal. The kind of weather soldiers remember, neutral, unsympathetic, perfect for war. At a diner off the highway, she found the only man she knew who could trace an encrypted message, Wyatt. He was waiting in a booth, nursing coffee. "You look like you haven't slept," he said. "I haven't," she replied, sliding into the seat. He studied her for a long moment. "You're not here for small talk." "No," she said flatly. "I need help tracking a text source. You still have your old network tools." He hesitated. "You realize what that means, right? If this ties back to anyone in uniform." "I know." He looked into her eyes, the same eyes that once told him, "Forget it happened." But now they carried something else. Resolve. "You're going to war again," he said softly. "War never ended," she answered. They moved to his back office, cluttered, dim, computers humming under flickering fluorescent lights. Wyatt worked quietly, tracing the signal chain from the message. Multiple proxies. Someone knew what they were doing. Government. He shrugged. Could be, but not just them. Whoever this is, they're using a hybrid route, half intel, half private sector, probably an ex-ops contractor. PMC. Most likely. She felt a chill. Private military companies were ghosts with budgets. They answered to no one. He leaned back. "Who are you really fighting, Brin?" She looked at him, expression unreadable. "The people who taught me how." By evening, they had a lead, a warehouse near the docks in San Diego, registered to a shell company called Ironbridge Logistics. Wyatt frowned at the screen. "Ironbridge doesn't exist, not legally." "It does now," Brin said, "and it's about to have visitors." "Don't go alone." "I've been alone since Syria." He reached out, hand on her arm. "You don't have to prove anything." She met his eyes. "I'm not proving, I'm remembering." The warehouse sat near the edge of the bay, rows of metal containers stacked like forgotten tombs. Wind carried the faint smell of diesel and salt. She moved through the shadows like she used to, light on her feet, breath controlled. The cig felt heavy and right in her hand. Her old training returned, muscle memory, angles, rhythm. Every sound mattered, every reflection. She reached a side door, picked the lock in 8 seconds. Inside, darkness, stale air, the hum of a generator. Rows of crates marked equipment. But what caught her attention was the faint red light of a camera in the corner. She was being watched. She raised the cig. "Show yourself." A voice echoed through the space. "Always the soldier." She froze. From the shadows, Admiral Whitmore stepped out. "You followed the trail like I knew you would," he said. Her jaw clenched. "You broke into my apartment. We recovered classified material. You weren't authorized to keep it." "Recovered? You mean destroyed." He sighed. "You don't understand, Brin. You're playing with something bigger than both of us." She laughed bitterly. "You mean the truth." Whitmore's tone hardened. "The strike was a necessity. The satellite feed misread coordinates. We had seconds to act. Command made the call." "Command made a mistake," she said. "We made a choice. That killed children." His voice dropped. "War kills children every day. You of all people should know that." Her hands trembled, not from fear, from rage. "And you buried it." Whitmore's eyes softened just for a moment. "You were dying, Brin. I had to decide, save you or save the story. I did both." You lied to the world. I protected it. By erasing me. He took a step closer. You think the world would have accepted a woman as the face of that mission? They'd have torn you apart. I gave you peace. She laughed, but it came out cracked. Peace. He looked at her with something like pity. You were supposed to stay dead. Her finger tightened slightly on the trigger. Then you should have finished the job. For a long, terrible moment, neither moved. Then Whitmore said quietly, You don't want to do this. You're right, she whispered. I want to stop it. A sudden noise, boots on metal behind her. She spun, instinct firing before thought. Two men, black tactical gear, no insignia. Shots rang out. Brin dove behind a crate, bullets sparking off steel. Whitmore shouted, Stand down, but they didn't. Contractors, no loyalty, only orders. She returned fire, clean, precise. 2 rounds. One man dropped. The other fell silent after the third. Smoke hung in the air. Whitmore looked shaken. You just... I survived, she said coldly. Again. He backed away. You have no idea what this will unleash. Neither do you. She moved closer. You covered up a strike that killed civilians. You buried your own operators. You left me to rot under a false name. And now people are dying again because you can't let the truth breathe. His voice cracked. You think the world wants the truth. They don't. They want stories that make them feel clean. Heroes and villains, that's it. Then I'll give them both, she said. She walked past him, grabbed the file case sitting on a crate labeled BLACKWATER/classified, EYES only. He reached for her arm. Don't do this, Brin. She turned to him. Her eyes were steady, but her voice broke softly. I already did it once. This time I'm finishing it. Outside, the rain had returned. She stood under the downpour, soaked, trembling, file clutched to her chest. Every instinct screamed to run, but another voice, the one that used to belong to her team, whispered something else. You can't save the world by hiding from it. She walked toward her car, headlights cutting through the fog. Behind her, the warehouse burned, flames licking the night, eating the evidence and the lies one piece at a time. Later that night, she sat in her car by the cliffs, engine off, staring at the dark water below. The file lay open on the passenger seat. Inside, after-action reports, classified transmission logs, and one image that stopped her heart. Drone coordinates. The East Sector. The strike. Her own name, attached to the approval code. For a long moment, she couldn't breathe. No, she whispered, that can't be mine. But the signature matched. Encrypted ID, Vindicor One. Her voice authorization. Her strike. She'd done it. Her knees went weak. She called the coordinates wrong. The children hadn't been collateral of command, they'd been hers. A single tear slipped down her face, hot against cold skin. The truth she'd chased had finally caught her. And it didn't set her free. It broke her. That night, as the wind howled against the cliffs, Brin whispered to the sea, Forgive me. The waves answered with silence. And for the first time since Syria, she felt small. Because sometimes the truth isn't about justice. Sometimes it's about learning whether you can still live with yourself once you finally find it. What happens when the truth you've been chasing turns around and finds you guilty? The rain hadn't stopped by morning. The ocean below the cliffs looked darker than night, and Brin Callahan hadn't moved for hours. Her car engine was off. The dashboard clock blinked 04:37. The classified file still sat open beside her, its edges curled from the humidity, its pages whispering with every gust of wind that slipped through the cracked window. Inside that file was her own name, her voice authorization, her coordinates. Vindicor One hadn't been framed. She'd been right there, finger on the comms, bleeding, dizzy, desperate. And in that desperation, she'd given the wrong call. It wasn't command. It was Whitmore. It was her. 2 lives lost because she'd been too broken to think clearly. She closed her eyes and leaned back against the seat. Her own breathing sounded foreign. For years, she'd believed she was erased to protect a lie. Now she knew she'd been erased to protect her from herself. By noon, she'd driven back to the city, not because she wanted to, but because hiding had lost its purpose. She parked in the hospital lot, sat there for 10 minutes before stepping out. No one recognized her walking down the corridor. To them, she was still Nurse Callahan, composed, quiet, maybe a little cold. But inside, she was something else entirely. She passed the trauma bay where she'd lost a patient 2 days ago, the one she'd sworn she could have saved. It felt heavier now, like every failure in her life had found a way to echo through her work. Maybe that was the curse of healing. You couldn't patch what you'd broken inside yourself. Brin. She looked up. Alyssa Kane, head of ER, was standing in the doorway of her office. "You've been gone 3 days," Alyssa said softly. "You okay?" Brin tried to form words, failed once. "I just needed time." "You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't." Alyssa hesitated. "If this is about that bar incident." "It's not." "Then talk to me. You're scaring people." Brin managed a weak smile. "I scare people by existing, apparently." Alyssa stepped closer. "You've saved half this city's emergencies. You've trained teams, led shifts no one else could handle. You're allowed to break Brin." Brin met her gaze, voice barely above a whisper. "Not me." "Why not?" "Because if I break, people die." The words came out too sharp, too raw. And Alyssa saw something in her eyes, something ancient, something haunted, and knew she wasn't talking about the hospital anymore. Alyssa didn't press, just nodded quietly. "Then don't break, but don't disappear either." Brin nodded, but inside she already knew. Disappearing was the only thing she'd ever been good at. That night she went home and stripped everything from her walls, photos, medals, anything with her name. She stuffed it all into a duffel. When she reached for the photo of Tariq and Illa, the children from Syria, her hands froze. She remembered their faces clearly now. Tariq's bravery, Illa's tiny hand clutching her sleeve. Layla, their mother, dying on the ground. Brin had carried both children through fire and chaos, whispering, "Hold on, I've got you." She'd sworn to protect them. And now she'd learned she hadn't protected everyone. She pressed the photo to her chest and sank to the floor, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. No sobs, no sound, just quiet grief, the kind that didn't need an audience. At dawn, she woke to a message. "Unknown number. We know what you found. Don't do something stupid." She stared at it, emotionless. Then another message followed. "Sutton's been arrested. Classified breach. Don't get involved." Her stomach turned. They were tying loose ends. She grabbed her phone and dialed. No answer, tried again. Voicemail. Then she dialed Wyatt. He answered immediately. "Brin, Jesus, where are you?" "Home. What happened to Sutton?" "They raided his house last night. Federal order sealed. He's gone." "Gone." "Gone like gone." Her heart went cold. She didn't ask what that meant. She already knew. By noon, the hospital was buzzing with news about her. Not the truth, not yet, but whispers. That she was under investigation. That she'd been seen with military brass. That her file had been flagged by federal security. People watched her differently again. The way they did that first night at Anchor Point, curious, uncertain, afraid. And it hit her. She'd been Vindicor One once. Now she was just Brin Callahan again. But both versions drew the same reaction, distance. It was the curse of being someone people couldn't understand. That evening, she drove back to the cliffs, the same place she'd faced her guilt hours ago. This time, she wasn't alone. Wyatt's truck was parked beside hers. He stood at the railing, arms folded, wind tossing his hair. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "Neither should you." He turned toward her, face grave. "I saw the footage." Her chest tightened. "How?" "You left your laptop at my place last night. I looked." "Wyatt, you called it in, didn't you?" She couldn't lie. "Yes." He stared at her for a long time. "Why are you telling me the truth?" "Because I've spent too long living inside a lie." He exhaled. "You were under fire, you were bleeding out. Anyone else would have done the same." "Anyone else didn't." He shook his head. "You saved 48 people, Brin. You think 2 deaths undo that?" "They undo me." "Then maybe you're the only one who still believes that balance sheet exists." She almost smiled. "You talk like you've carried one." He looked away. "We all have." The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was heavy, necessary. Finally, he said, "What are you going to do?" She looked out at the ocean. The horizon swallowed the sun, blood red against the waves. "I don't know," she said, "but someone's killing anyone connected to Blackwater. Sutton, Ryan, maybe Whitmore next. And you think they'll stop there?" "No." He turned to her. "Then what's your move?" Her eyes hardened. "I spent years saving lives. Maybe it's time I save the truth." That night she sat at her kitchen table with the file spread open again. Every page, every log, every transmission, she read it line by line until her eyes burned. There was a pattern. Times, codes, signatures. Her comms authorization had been tampered with. A secondary override line, same voice, slightly distorted. Someone had cloned her ID during the strike. Her breath caught. She hadn't called it. She hadn't given the wrong coordinates. They'd used her voice to authorize it. The guilt, the shame, all of it had been built on someone else's deception. Her heart pounded. Whoever had done it wanted her erased for good reason. Because if she lived long enough to piece it together, she'd expose them. She picked up her phone and called Thatcher. It rang twice, then. "Callahan." "It wasn't me," she said. "The Blackwater strike. They cloned my ID. There's a double-auth line in the comm logs. I can prove it." He was silent. "Then you have the file?" "Yes." "Then listen carefully," he said. "Don't take it home. Don't bring it to the press. There's a safe house 2 miles east of Point Loma. You'll meet someone there." "Who?" "Someone who still believes the truth matters." The line went dead. The drive to Point Loma was long and quiet. The moon hung low over the ocean, pale and distant. She parked near the cliffs again, the same road where the world always seemed to fall apart for her, and walked toward the old lighthouse at the edge. A figure waited near the base. Tall, military bearing, face half lit by the moon. "Whitmore." Her stomach turned. He stepped forward. "I knew you'd find the file." She raised her gun. "You used my voice." He didn't deny it. "We had to authorize the strike. You were down, unconscious. Command needed a voice ID. We didn't know civilians were still inside. You used me as cover." He nodded once. "And then I buried you to keep the story from consuming you." Her voice trembled. "You didn't save me, you saved yourself." He didn't argue. "Maybe, but the truth won't bring them back, Brin. It'll only destroy everything you've built since." She stepped closer, eyes blazing. "Maybe that's exactly what it should do." For a long, terrible second, neither spoke. Only the waves crashed below, relentless. Whitmore's voice finally broke. "You can't fix what happened out there. You can only decide how it ends now." Her jaw clenched. "And what if I'm done letting other people decide that for me?" The wind whipped around them, cold and sharp. Whitmore's gaze softened. "You were the best of us, Callahan. That's why I silenced you, because I knew you'd never stop until the truth burned us all." She lowered the gun, eyes filled with something between rage and grief. "Then maybe it's time to let it burn." She turned and walked away, not fast, not running, just walking. No music, no gunfire, just footsteps on gravel fading into the dark. Her voiceover closed the silence, quiet, almost prayer-like. "They called me Vindicor One. They said I didn't exist, but the truth doesn't need a name. Sometimes it hides in the noise, sometimes it bleeds, and sometimes it waits until you're brave enough to face what's left of yourself. What if the truth you buried was the only thing that could save you?" The morning after Point Loma was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that always came before a storm. Brin Callahan sat at her kitchen table again, staring at the open file. The same pages, the same lies. But now she knew exactly what each of them meant. They had used her. Her voice, her identity, her silence, all to protect the myth of control. And for years she'd carried their guilt, not because she was guilty, but because she believed she was. That was the genius of the cover-up. It didn't need to be proven. It only needed her to believe it. Outside, the world was already waking to chaos. Every news outlet, every social feed, every whisper carried the same words: Operation Blackwater. The leak had gone viral overnight. A video, edited, cut, framed for outrage, showing fragments of the drone strike. No context, no command chain, just the destruction. And over the footage, a voice ID. Vindicor One. Her voice. Brin watched it play across her TV. The same cadence, the same tone. But she knew now it wasn't her. It was the recording they'd created. The authorization that turned her into a weapon against herself. A headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen. BLACKWATER scandal. Female operator implicated in civilian strike cover-up. She muted the TV. The sound of her own heartbeat filled the silence instead. By midday, she was gone again. No bags this time. Just the file, her phone, and the coin Thatcher had given her years ago. The one he said belonged to the ones who stayed when it went bad. She didn't know where Thatcher was now. The last time they'd spoken, he'd told her to be careful who she trusted. Now she had no one left to trust, except her own resolve. She parked outside the Anchor Point bar. The same place it all began. The same room where she'd said two words that changed everything: Vindicor One. The place was half empty. Wyatt stood behind the counter, drying glasses, pretending not to recognize the woman who'd walked in. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "Neither should you," she replied. He set the glass down. "It's all over the news." "I know. They're saying you killed civilians." "I didn't." He looked at her uncertain. "Then who did?" Brin exhaled. "Everyone who told me not to speak." She slid a flash drive onto the counter. Her own encrypted copy of the comm logs, hidden before the body cam was stolen. Wyatt stared at it. "What is this?" "The truth. Every transmission, every override, every falsified report. Enough to burn half the command structure if it goes public." He hesitated. "You're giving this to me." "No, I'm asking you to upload it." His eyebrows lifted. "You trust me that much?" "I don't trust anyone," she said softly. "But you don't lie to yourself about what's right. That's more than I can say for most." He took the drive. "You know what this will do, right?" "Yeah," she said. "End something that never really ended." Outside, rain started again, soft, cold, steady. She stood under the awning, watching cars pass. For a moment, she thought about walking away. Disappearing again. She'd done it before. But something inside her, the same instinct that once kept her alive on battlefields, told her this was the last chance to stop running. The wind carried the sound of approaching sirens. She turned. Two unmarked black SUVs slid to a stop across the street. She knew the look. No logos, no lights. Not police. Not press. Private. The same kind of cleanup team they'd sent for Ryan. Wyatt saw them through the window. Brin. I know. He reached under the counter, pulled out a shotgun, and loaded it with a resigned sigh. I told myself I was done with this kind of thing, he muttered. You were, she said quietly. I'm not. They came fast. 3 men in tactical jackets, weapons drawn, moving like they'd rehearsed it. Brin ducked behind a table as glass shattered. Wyatt fired once warning shot. The air filled with smoke and shouting. She moved like muscle memory, low, efficient, deliberate. Her pistol barked twice. One man went down, the other staggered. The third shouted, Callahan, surrender. She froze behind cover. The voice. Familiar. She rose slowly, gun trained. The man removed his mask. Sloan. Of course. He looked at her, torn between authority and regret. Don't do this, Brin. It's already done, she said. You leak that file, you destroy everything. Careers, reputations, the system. The system killed my team. It saved millions more. Her eyes narrowed. At what cost? He hesitated. At yours. They stared at each other across the chaos. 2 soldiers who'd fought the same war and lost to the same enemy. The lie that sacrifice fixes everything. Then quietly she said, You know what the difference is between us, Sloan. What? I stopped believing silence was honorable. The sound of approaching sirens broke the standoff. Real ones this time. Local police, too public, too messy. Sloan lowered his weapon slowly. This isn't over. Brin nodded. No, it's finally beginning. He turned, gestured for his team to fall back. They disappeared as quickly as they came. Wyatt lowered his shotgun. You good? She holstered her pistol. No. He gave a faint grin. Didn't think so. That night the footage went live. Every encrypted packet, every data log, uploaded to half a dozen independent servers, mirrored across networks that couldn't be shut down. Wyatt didn't ask how she'd gotten the encryption keys. He didn't ask who she'd crossed. He just hit upload. And in the hours that followed, the world saw what she'd carried for years, the override authorization, the voice splice, the fabricated report, the cover-up of the strike. The story didn't paint her a hero. It didn't paint her a villain either. It painted her human. And for Brin, that was enough. By dawn, she was gone again. The city woke to chaos, hearings, investigations, resignations. Whitmore's name appeared in every headline. Sutton's death was reclassified as under review. And the military issued a single statement. We honor all who serve, but accountability must serve them in return. It was vague, political, empty. But it was more honesty than she'd ever expected. Brin stood on the pier, watching the sunrise burn through the fog. Her hair whipped across her face, eyes red but steady. She was Vindicor One anymore. She wasn't the ghost sniper, or the forgotten medic, or the erased name on a classified line. She was just Brin Callahan. Alive, flawed, free. Wyatt found her there, coffee in hand. You look like someone who's either at peace or about to collapse. Maybe both, she said softly. You did it, you know, the world finally saw. Brin smiled faintly. They saw what they wanted, but for once it's close enough. He sipped his coffee. What now? She looked toward the horizon, the place where war and sea and sky all blurred into one endless line. I go back, she said. To what? To living, she whispered. As the camera of the moment pulls back, the wind picking up, the ocean roaring faintly below, Her voice carries one final reflection. They erased my name to protect their story. But stories end. Names don't. You can hide the truth. You can bury it under medals, missions, or mistakes. But it always remembers the way home. She closes her eyes, the sound of the surf swelling beneath her. Sometimes dignity doesn't shout. It just keeps breathing. How do you live after you've told the world the truth? A week had passed since the upload, and the world had changed, not all at once, not dramatically, but in small, quiet ways that mattered. The story of Operation Blackwater had become a storm, congressional hearings, public outrage, 1,000 pundits tearing apart pieces of the same wound. Every broadcast repeated her name. Brin Callahan, Vindicor One. The woman who came back from the dead to tell the truth. They debated her like she was an idea, not a person. Was she a hero, a traitor, a victim, a survivor? They argued about her as if she wasn't out there, breathing quietly in a rented cottage miles from the noise, where the sea met the cliffs, and the world finally stopped asking her to choose between silence and survival. The days were simple now. Coffee, walks at dawn, a job she hadn't taken yet. She'd been offered reinstatement at the hospital, full honors, public apology, media redemption arc. She declined. Saving lives wasn't about headlines. And forgiveness, hers, theirs, anyone, didn't come with press releases. She spent mornings sitting on the porch, listening to waves crash against the rocks below. Sometimes she'd catch herself counting, like she used to count targets, exits, breaths under fire. Old habits didn't die. They just changed shape. One afternoon, a car pulled up the long dirt road to her cottage. Unmarked civilian plates. She knew that sound, government suspension, heavy tires, low idle. She didn't reach for a weapon. She didn't need to. The door opened, and Admiral Pierce Whitmore stepped out. He looked smaller than she remembered. Or maybe she just stopped seeing him as a giant. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. She gestured to the porch chair across from her. He sat, exhaled slowly, and for a moment neither spoke. "The world's tearing itself apart over you," he said finally. "I'm used to it," she replied. "They're calling you the conscience of the military." She half smiled. "That's terrifying." He nodded. "You could have stayed quiet." "I did," she said softly, "for years." He studied her face, searching for anger and finding only calm. "You cost me everything, Callahan." She nodded. "So did you." He almost smiled at that. "Fair." The silence stretched, filled only by the sound of gulls and distant surf. Then his tone softened. "For what it's worth, I'm not here to threaten you. There's nothing left to threaten you with. I'm here because you were right." Brin looked at him. "About what?" "About the truth. It doesn't save anyone, but it changes them." She tilted her head. "And you changed." He gave a tired chuckle. "I'm testifying next week. Full disclosure, I should have done it years ago." "You'll lose everything," she said. He nodded. "Then maybe I'll finally find something that matters." They sat there for a long time, two ghosts who'd finally stopped haunting each other. When he stood to leave, she said quietly, "Pierce." He turned. "Thank you for not lying this time." He gave a sad smile. "You're still not very good at taking orders." She smiled faintly. "Never was." He got in his car and drove away, not looking back, not needing to. For both of them, the war was finally over. That night, Brin walked down to the shoreline. Barefoot, jeans rolled up, the wind cold enough to bite. The tide was coming in fast. She stood where the waves met the sand, letting the water wash over her ankles, the pull and release like breath. In her hand, she held the Delta coin. The one Thatcher gave her. The one that used to mean belonging. She turned it over once, twice, then looked out at the horizon. "Row," she whispered, Alice, everyone, I kept my promise." The words carried away with the wind. She crouched and placed the coin on the wet sand, letting the tide take it. It gleamed once under the moonlight, then vanished. And somehow, that small act felt like forgiveness. A week later, she received a letter. No return address. Just a short note, handwritten on standard-issue stationery. "Master Chief Callahan, the children you saved, Tariq and Illa, live in Ankara now. They sent this for you. A friend." Inside the envelope was a small drawing. Crayon faded and childlike. A woman in a tan uniform kneeling with two children, one holding her hand. Above them, written in shaky English, "Thank you for being brave when we were scared." Her throat closed. For the first time in years, the tears didn't burn. They felt clean. Months passed. The hearings came and went. The world found new stories to chase. The military issued quiet reforms, oversight boards, transparency committees. It wasn't perfect, it never would be. But it was something. And her name, Brin Callahan, faded from headlines. Just the way she wanted. One evening, Wyatt found her sitting outside the cottage, mug of tea in hand. He looked better, finally at ease. "You know," he said, "people keep asking where you are. You could have cashed in on this. Books, interviews, documentaries." Brin smiled. "They already took my story once. I'm not giving it away again." He nodded. "So what now?" She looked at the sunset, soft gold fading to violet. "I was thinking about starting a clinic, quiet place, maybe near the border, help people who can't afford hospitals." He raised a brow, "Still saving lives?" "Maybe just trying to make up for the ones I couldn't." He sat beside her. "That's not how redemption works, Brin." She glanced at him. "Then how does it?" He smiled faintly. "By living like you deserve it." She considered that for a long moment, then nodded. "Maybe I'll try that too." That night she lay in bed, listening to the ocean. The rhythm of the waves reminded her of a heartbeat, steady, human, real. And somewhere between sleep and memory, she heard voices again. Rose's laugh, Alice's teasing. Tariq's small voice saying, "I'll be brave, miss. I'll be brave like you." She smiled in the dark. For the first time, it didn't hurt to remember. The scene shifts, morning light over the ocean. Brin walks down the same pier from the beginning. The same place where her legend was born. Only this time, no one turns to stare. No whispers, no cameras. Just a woman walking into the daylight, alive, quiet, ordinary. The narrator's voice, her own, carries softly over the waves. "They called me Vindicor One. They called me a ghost, a hero, a lie. But I was never any of those things. I was just a person trying to do what was right, and learning too late that right and wrong aren't maps. They're mirrors. And sometimes you don't like what you see." She pauses, staring out at the horizon. But maybe that's okay. Maybe being human means learning how to live with the echoes. She takes a breath. Because sometimes the strongest people aren't the ones who fight forever. They're the ones who finally put the gun down. The camera holds on her as the sun breaks through the clouds, light spilling over the waves, soft and clean. Her last words, almost a whisper. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Fade to black.